From multifamily apartments in the town of Mount Pleasant to the discussion over widening Highway 41, I speak exclusively with Mount Pleasant Town Council member Kathy Landing for this edition of Quintin's Close-Ups. And if you haven't already, subscribe to my YouTube channel and like Quintin's Close-Ups on Facebook. Kathy Landing, welcome back to Quintin's Close-Ups.
Well, thank you, Quintin. It's a pleasure to be here.
Oh, I appreciate it greatly. Obviously, you are the current member of the Mount Pleasant Town Council. Describe Kathy Landing these days.
Oh, well, it has been very, very busy. Like so many people, we struggled over the last year. Obviously, it was a tragic period for a lot of folks, including ourselves. We actually lost two family members, very close family members, not to COVID. Heart attack, my father-in-law and my brother fell and cracked his head. So it was a horrible year. And in the midst of all that, everyone was trying to do what they could to keep their businesses going, do what they could to keep their families safe. And we on town council were certainly struggling with a lot of things that no one had encountered before. And I think a lot of us were doing our very best to apply both common sense, but also a sense of what we could gather on information out there to make really good decisions. So the person I am today is someone who's a little bit more, war weary, I guess. Not war is a little too extreme, but definitely a very hard year for everybody. And at the same time, very appreciative that we came through this and that we're very, very close to perhaps even herd immunity within the next month or two from everything I keep reading and hearing. So already got my first vaccination, second one on the way in a couple weeks. So.
Oh, okay. And you obviously talk a lot about COVID, and I know that I'm pretty sure there are a lot of things that you all want to get done for the town of Mount Pleasant, but current budgetary restraints won't allow for it, I'm sure. What are your current budget rules for the town of Mount Pleasant?
Well, actually, the good news is, and I've tried not to spend all my time talking about COVID. I bring it up when it's appropriate, and it certainly has been an extremely important elephant in the room topic for the last year. But at the same time, I'm delighted to say that the town of Mount Pleasant was prepared, not necessarily for a pandemic per se, but for an emergency. And so we were able, through our excellent staff's work, especially our CFO, Marcy Kotov, and our administrator, Eric Demora, and then I'm on the finance committee, and we made some decisions, and we were able to actually just kind of shift things around a little, do a hiring freeze, and put off a couple of projects a little longer in order to be able to not cut any staff, not furlough anybody, and meet all of our obligations. So we continue to remain a AAA rated town, which is extremely important. And just recently, we actually did move forward on an extremely important project, which was a $10 million bond in order to fix the drainage problems in the Royal Basin of Old Village. This is the one that's in the worst shape, and we're very, very excited that we're going to be breaking ground soon on actually doing that work. It's going to be a little hard for folks traveling around in there for a while, but we'll do the best we can on making it comfortable. We also have plans in the works for moving forward with the Edwards Basin and then the rest of Old Village subsequently. So we have staged it out. And I do want to say one of the reasons we staged it out like this was because the original plan was to borrow $20 million at once and raise the stormwater fee. And I was one of the people that stood up against that. I said, we do not need people that have already been paying these fees for years and gotten really very little out of it to suddenly have to pay more. And so we waited. And just by waiting, we were able to save the town, our taxpayers, I calculated over $1 million worth of tax money just by waiting until it was actually ready to move forward. So we're excited. I know that was a long-winded answer, but we are excited. We are excited that we kept the budget in shape. We kept our staff in place, and we've been able to get through all of this much, much better than a lot of communities because of that.
Now, if you all were to get the $20 million and had to up the stormwater fee, what would that be for the average taxpayer?
I don't have the figures on it right now, but at the time, I will tell you they wanted to go from $60 a person up to at least $100. initially, and they had just raised it from 30 to 60 before I came on council, about a year before I came on council. So I said, gee, you just raised it 100%. Now you want to raise it another, 60, 66% or whatever. So we did not do that. We do not need to do that, and we're not going to do that. So there is another important thing out there, which, is mixed, controversial in terms of the source, but the town of Mount Pleasant is going to be awarded COVID relief money.
Right.
And we already have a figure on that, and it's quite a bit of money. And because we have run things very, very well, and we have no major outstanding problems, we can move forward with other capital improvement plan items to help our roads and our drainage and so forth. So we're very excited that we actually will at least be able to put some folks to work with that, and also solve some very big issues that would have probably taken a few more years to get started on.
With the COVID relief fund, what capital projects should the town of Mount Pleasant focus on right now?
Well, there are several that we're already finishing up right now. Park West Boulevard widening. In fact, that'll actually, I just drove through that coming back from a ribbon cutting, and that's actually supposed to be complete by the end of April. That will definitely allow buses and parents taking children to school in the morning to get through a lot easier, as well as commuters, of course, out of Park West and Dunes West. So that's going to be a tremendous help, and that was already funded, of course. And so then we have several more things on the capital improvement plan that were either near to be funded or not quite yet. Things like the final piece of the Billy Swales Boulevard. That's going to be very important when that's finished. And I think that is possibly one of the ones that we can move forward with because of the current situation. And what that will do, if anybody's not familiar with it, it will connect another full artery from south to north and vice versa in Mount Pleasant. So no longer will 17 and Rifle Range be the only way to cross the town. And it will, I believe, greatly help traffic in the mornings and at night. So, as well as any other time of day. So we're excited about moving forward. That's probably one of the big ones. Some of the things we were already going to move forward with this year, so that's not a COVID relief thing. We were already going to do some major improvements at Waterfront Park. There was a whole phase that we were going to add that includes a lot more parking and a number of amenities for our community to enjoy. I think there's supposed to be a splash pad, a dog park, and a number of other things, as well as I believe there's going to be a restaurant, but I can't remember the details. We certainly aren't building a restaurant for someone else. So, but I do know that we're going to be improving greatly parking and access to Waterfront Park.
Now, with that parking, what study are you looking at right now?
What study are we looking at? I don't understand.
Yes, for parking, additional parking at Waterfront Park. What study are you looking at?
I'm not sure where we are in that process, okay. So I know that there hasn't been anything formal. I believe we have some folks considering it, but I'm not sure who's doing that work for us. I'd have to look that up, sorry.
Oh, no worries at all. And tell me, Kathy, what are the current revenue trends for the town of Mount Pleasant?
The revenue, I'm sorry, say it again?
Yeah, the revenue trends for the town of Mount Pleasant.
The revenue trends have been actually reasonably good. For one thing, I can just say with great joy that that we did have a lot of new businesses come to Mount Pleasant over the last couple of years, including this past 12 months. In fact, some of them, it's pretty incredible. We actually had, I've been to a ton of ribbon cuttings because of several dental practices. We've had several restaurants. We've had a lot of great facilities come. But in addition, the things that maybe don't catch the public's eye as much, we've had a number of companies like Q4 Launch, which located here last year, but they were able to expand during this year. We had the expansion of Gear Logistics and a number of other companies that are in the either tech or areas that are not necessarily public facing all the time. So we have quite a list. I can actually send you the list of all the economic development wins we had, which means businesses that bring high paying jobs and great facilities. So the answer to your question is the revenue for Mount Pleasant, although we lost on the ATAC, so the accommodations tax part of it, because obviously during lockdowns and part of the rest of the year, we had lower revenues from that. We did substantially better than expected, and so we are actually in very good shape. Again, very grateful for living in such a beautiful place. And by the way, our numbers here in Mount Pleasant, as terrible as COVID was across the country, our numbers were much lower, and so we have a lot to be thankful and grateful for.
Now, the tax revenues, how much did you all lose over the past year with COVID?
I know what was estimated. I don't have, we're actually getting ready to have a budget meeting. So I don't have the final numbers yet on that. Our budget meeting is next week, but we will. And if you'd like me to send that to you afterwards, I'm happy to do so.
And I know you talked earlier about the economic development wins for the town of Mount Pleasant. How do you keep winning with economic development for the next 5 to 10 years?
Excellent question. Since I'm the Economic Development Chair, I need to have a plan for that, don't we? So our plan for that is to continue to focus on areas that work really well for a community like Mount Pleasant, that fit within our size-wise, as well as things like we don't want businesses that take a lot of water because we have, the aquifer. We don't want to touch that. So what we've been doing is back in December, I actually asked our staff to arrange, and we did have some Zoom meetings with both the CRDA, Charleston Regional Development Authority, as well as Charleston County Economic Development. And those meetings were very helpful because what it did is we let them know that Mount Pleasant is open for business, that we want to bring businesses, especially in some of the areas that CRDA considers to be the core areas for the whole community. And that includes things like technology and healthcare and health sciences. But we also added an area to that, and that was corporate headquarters and financial. And the reason for this is that we have some wonderful office space that opened during the last 12 months and is now 100% full. And that is the building at Ferry Wharf, right next to the new Embassy Suites that just opened. We're going to be doing the ribbon cutting soon. And that building, which was owned by the Holder Company, Mike Bennett built it, and then it was owned by the Holder Company, that is 100% leased. It's just recently been sold for the most ever for a corporate building, from what I understand from Mike Bennett, in the entire Charleston area, and very successful. And one of the things that happened with that was we were able to attract the merger of the various locations of Merrill Lynch into that building, plus Bank of America opened there. Fidelity Investments opened in there. Palmetto Surety Bond moved over from Daniel Island to there and has a beautiful office. And then we have an incredible thing called Serendipity Labs, which is basically like a startup for, it's like an incubator, but it's a very high-end incubator. Beautiful space overlooking the water and all the services that you'd want if you have a small office and want some executive services. And there's several others. I hate to leave anybody out. There's several other companies in there. So we're continuing on that. Mike Bennett is building more. There's going to be another building, a corporate building there. And so we're reaching out. I just recently reached out to a company out of Chicago that loves our area and said, wouldn't you, and they know they have representatives down here. I said, wouldn't you like to have a bulkhead or a satellite down here? I've reached across the pond because we do have the direct flights that hopefully are coming back soon. So I've reached out to a contact through the House of Lords over there because we'd love to have somebody who would bring maybe like a reinsurance company, like a Lloyd's of London headquarters here. So we've got several things in the works there. I've reached out to I reached out to one of the city council members in London about that. So we're continuing to do everything we can because Mount Pleasant, we don't need a whole lot more growth. We all know we're already grown up and grown maybe ahead of ourselves. What we need are great jobs and great revenue producing businesses and services on this side of the bridge. If we can bring more businesses to this side of the bridge that help employ our folks over here so they don't have to commute to North Charleston or downtown Charleston for work, we can save a lot of car trips over the bridge and we can actually help solve some of the traffic issues that way.
And what exactly are the traffic issues right now?
Well, it's interesting what we saw during the whole COVID lockdown period, where even after our initial lockdown was over, which I remember very clearly, Cinco de Mayo, because restaurants could actually open up for outdoor seating that day. So our period of time was fairly short for that, and then we had the staged in terms of percentage of folks in there. But even with that, one of the things that we saw, I got off track there a minute. What was the question again? I apologize.
Oh, no worries. Just traffic issues in the town of Mount Pleasant.
Traffic, right. So what we saw during that was, of course, the traffic dropped way down to almost nothing compared to normal. Schools working, going virtually, and parents having to stay home because they had children who were having to learn from home, homeschooling. And so as we came back gradually, what we saw was Mount Pleasant traffic came back with a roar. And during that time, we have worked hard on projects like Park West Boulevard and others. But we do still, I believe that telecommuting is going to continue to be impactful. There are a lot of people who have learned. I've telecommuted for years, 1 day a week, and it was always my most productive day of the week. And I think what people have learned now is, hey, I can do this. So where they have the flexibility, not all jobs can do it. Lots of jobs cannot. But for those that can, I think we will see that continue to be a friend to the traffic issue. But clearly, we still need to get some of these other projects done. And as soon as we finish Park West Boulevard and looking out to the future, as soon as we have, there is a connector road from Rifle Range to 17. That is one of the ones that we have funded and that we will be moving forward with soon. And then when we have that artery north and south added, which is the end of the Billy Swales Parkway, I believe we will see some improvement on our traffic here.
And I forgot to ask you this, Kathy, but where exactly has property taxes provided significant revenue for the town of Mount Pleasant?
Well, our property tax revenue has increased substantially over the years, mostly due in the earlier years to residential growth. And a lot of us came on council because we felt the residential growth was happening way ahead of the infrastructure and just too fast. It was happening too fast. And I personally was very concerned when I saw a lot of areas around where we are changed over from commercial and industrial and economic development areas to residential, creating more traffic and more burden on the road. So that was one of the reasons I ran for council. And so, but having said that, because of the growth that we did see, and now with a lot of the additional businesses that have come to Mount Pleasant, we actually have seen an increase in our property tax. You might also know this is the year that the reassessment was done.
Right.
And the reassessment, because property values have gone up substantially in the Charleston area, which we're all grateful for that. But of course, we don't want a situation where people are priced out of their own home just because their home value went up even while they were just sitting still. So we did have a period of time where we had to either roll the taxes all the way back so that it was revenue neutral, or perhaps come to some sort of compromise level. And I actually missed the vote that day. My brother had passed away and I was out of town at that service. But they did have the vote, and what was decided was to roll it about halfway back. So we went from 0.41 millage to 0.39 as opposed to 0.37. And what that extra 0.02 did was that's put towards debt. And so that was one of the things that allowed the $10 million drainage project to go forward without raising stormwater fees. I am on the Flood Resilience Committee, and it is our intention to have the stormwater fee become a tiered cost, where small properties pay a lot less than great big properties who probably cause a lot more runoff and so forth. And we're working on that. We were hoping to have that come out at the same time, but COVID kind of set us back on that too. And there is a possibility that some of the folks that have a little bit of an increase in their taxes from the millage will get a little relief on their stormwater fee. So we're hoping that's going to work out so that it will have been almost a net neutral for a lot of folks.
And what is the typical home value right now in the town of Mount Pleasant?
Well, we were running in the 400 and something. I think it's higher than that now. I believe the current is probably more in the high 400s, which makes it very, very expensive for anyone to move here who isn't in some kind of really high paying, type of work or whatever. And so one of the things that we are working hard, I'm very much a part of this through economic development. If you can't bring workers here to work and live nearby, you just create more traffic problems, and or you don't have the staff you need. So one of the things we're working on is we have one private developer who is building what are called micro townhomes. They're very attractive, 2-story or 3-story maybe homes off of Gregory Ferry Road, and he's building those, and hopefully they're going to be done before too long. And then we have 2 more private developers who are going to build properties, but they do need a little help from the town related to that. So we'll be not money wise, but in terms of perhaps the zoning and so forth. So we're going to be looking at those two projects, and that would involve the two separate projects would involve, and there's not projects, that's the wrong word to use, but these two places to live would be at least 200 people that would be able to afford to live as teachers, firemen, policemen, nurses, med techs, all the things we need for our town to continue to thrive.
Let me bring you to the obvious. Mount Pleasant Town Council has passed an ordinance that will prevent new apartment complexes from being built for the next 2 years, and council unanimously approved the ordinance Tuesday night. And according to the ordinance, the town has seen and continues to see an increase in applications to build new multi-family apartments. How many applications did the town receive in 2020?
I don't have the exact number of how many we received, but what I can tell you is that we already had a moratorium in place. And there were already quite a few properties that were permitted. An example of that right now that you've seen the land cleared is the Legacy apartment building that's going to be right there on Patriots Point Boulevard, right in front of Bridgeside.
Right.
And that's quite a huge project. And another one that happened, again, this is before the moratorium last time, we saw quite a few go up in the Midtown area. And so in this past year, again, there was already a moratorium in place, except for things that were related to senior housing and workforce housing. And again, the thinking there was we do need our seniors to have a place that's affordable to live. We don't want them to have to move away from Mount Pleasant when they get to that point of, say, downsizing from a home. And gosh, our average rent in Mount Pleasant is probably at least $1,300 or $1,400, and I think most of them are higher for a single apartment. So, and I know there's a lot that are $1,500 and up. So it's very expensive. So we have that exception that was in for the old moratorium, and then we had the workforce one. Under the new moratorium, the senior one is gone because we actually had quite a bit of senior housing come online in this last year and a half. We have Revel, which is up off of Faison Road. That's going to be it's already being built. That's going to have, including a memory care and a lot of cottages and a facility where it's multifamily. And then we also had, of course, Merrill Gardens come into place. So we've got quite a bit of senior housing.
Now, you talked about the old moratorium and the exemptions there. What are the exemptions for the new moratorium?
The main exemption is still for workforce housing. Okay. So, and part of the reason I don't care for moratoriums as a tool because they are so strident. But I have to say I did, in fact, I voted against it in the first one, but I did not flip-flop. What I said in the first one was I said, we don't have data in front of us. Why didn't someone, if we were going to recommend a moratorium, why didn't we have data? And I asked for it, and they did not have it. What were the percentages of apartments and multifamily versus single? That's an important number to know. Where do we stand on our average cost in Mount Pleasant? And they didn't have any of that information. So I went back on my own and checked with staff in between and found out that we're right in the ballpark of where most communities need to be, of about 27% multifamily versus the 73%, of course, single family. And on top of that, yes, our biggest problem is we're not going to be able to see enough apartments built to be able to actually get to a saturation point. In a lot of communities, that's how you let the free market work. If you get to a saturation point and people just aren't getting those apartments anymore, the prices come down. That's the free market. Unfortunately, we don't have enough room for that. So then it comes down to, okay, we need workforce apartment pricing because we need for folks to be able to live near where they work. And if they work at the hospital or they work in the various health sciences labs, or they work for the town of Mount Pleasant, or they work in restaurants, we need those folks to be able to live nearby. So that's why we kept the exemption for workforce housing apartments, and that's why I did vote for it in the final reading.
Now, the town council says the ordinance would town planner Michelle Reed says the town's new comprehensive plan calls for limited residential in certain areas of town. Where exactly is that?
The limited residential?
Yes, ma'am.
One of the areas that we looked at as one of the things we wanted that the comprehensive plan, and it was an incredible, I want to thank again publicly all the citizens, and it was over 200 citizens who participated in that process. It took a very, very long time, and we've taken a really long time in passing it, and I'm so thankful we did pass the comprehensive plan. But one of the things that kept hanging it up was the concept of hubs. Major hubs of town that would be places where people could live, work, and play, which in theory is great. And, that way, hopefully they don't have to get in a car every time they want to go do something. or the drive is very short. But what happened is there was one area, and it was actually around town center, where it would have called for, if we kept the ratios the same as what was being called for elsewhere, it would have meant that we would be basically encouraging a huge amount of residential growth in the town center area. And that wasn't something that a lot of folks felt comfortable with. So we actually did change the comprehensive plan wording so that would not be one of the hub areas with the percentage of residential. So I would say that that's where we were trying to slow residential growth a little bit. We also have a permit allocation in place and have for several years, and that still has a couple more years to go. I think it was 5 years. And that just slowed the growth from an almost unsustainable level in terms of keeping up, which was over 4%, down to about 2%.
And what's the ratio elsewhere?
The ratio of growth?
Yes, ma'am.
Residential growth? I'm not sure, but Mount Pleasant has an interesting, we were the fastest growing city east of the Mississippi for a period of time. And we have gone from like 55,000 to 95,000 in probably just the last 15 years. So I think the issue for us is, rather than compare ourselves to somewhere else that just doesn't have the same metrics we do, I think we simply have to open up our eyes and look around. We can clearly see that this town is just about built out. There's not a lot of raw land left. And what remaining raw land there is, we're trying very, very hard to attract great businesses. I know I sound like a broken record, but it's so important that we bring services and great jobs. And when I say great jobs, all jobs are great. I totally disagree with this idea that we had essential jobs and non-essential. All jobs are important if it's your job. But what I mean is that people will have the choice of having high-paying jobs on this side of the bridge. So that's why we want that last remaining, those parcels of land that we have, and we're well aware of where they are, and we're working hard to recruit great companies to bring services and great jobs to our side of the bridge.
Now, going back to limited residential, how do you rework the zoning code with future limited residential?
What did you say? How do we rework the zoning code?
Yes, ma'am, for future limited residential.
Well, we have the permit allocation, which is not zoning codes. What we're trying to do is make sure that when we get requests to go from, anything that's R1 or various residential codes, that we don't convert over. The other way around, that we don't go from industrial or commercial or, which we really don't have industrial, but if it's county and it's annexing in and it's industrial, we don't want to necessarily bring them in as R1. And that's an automatic thing, by the way. If we bring something into the town as annexation, it automatically comes in as R1 unless we do something else right away. So what we're trying to do is focus on those annexations of property. We do still have a lot of unincorporated Charleston County within our boundaries. So we're trying to bring those in as economic development or some other form of commercial related to the projects and services that are needed in that area. Again, focusing as much as we can on things that bring great jobs. So that's probably the best way from a zoning viewpoint that we will limit, is when we bring things in, we're going to try very hard not to bring them in, and certainly not bring them in with higher densities like R3 or R4.
And how many jobs do you want to bring to the town in the next 4 years?
Wow, that's a great question. We should have that written down, shouldn't we? Let's just say that right now we have approximately 25,000 cars a day that go over the bridges out of Mount Pleasant. And there's plenty of reason to believe if they're commuting every day, they're probably doing that for work. Some of it might be for school, but a lot of it's for work. So certainly I'd like to bring thousands and thousands. I don't know if I should say a number out loud that's outrageous. So let's say it wouldn't hurt my feelings if we could bring 1,000 new jobs each year for the next 5 years, maybe more. If we can bring that many jobs, and we do have companies we're talking to where that's a strong possibility. So if we can bring at least 1,000 jobs over the next 5 years, that's 5,000 jobs on this side of the bridge that are great jobs. I'm talking about recruiting things. We're getting a lot of things coming our way because of how great Mount Pleasant is, such as new dental offices and new other things. But we wanted to have also, and we love that, we also want to have companies with tech, finance, and corporate headquarters and health sciences. all of those things, which dental is technically health science. So.
And speaking of cars, let me talk to you about Highway 41. And obviously, this is a Charleston County project. You said this quote, they just don't see why we're going to spend $50 million on something I don't think we need right now. Why are they, meaning Charleston County, spending millions more on money on this particular project? And let me ask you this, Kathy. Why, after 3.5 years of study, feedback and analysis, and millions of taxpayers' dollars, are they simply choosing to do something different than what their analysis had led them to do?
So, was that you? Are you saying that was a quote of mine somewhere?
I think so. I might be wrong.
Okay. So that sounds like it might be a little stretch, but it's okay. So first of all, yes, there was a lot of time and effort put into alternative one, because that was the overwhelming feedback that was done during the study period of both public opinion as well as the various important aspects of NEPA study, including, wetlands and disruption of homes and so forth. But one of the things that they probably didn't put enough weight on was the impact of the fact that we do have a community, Phillips community, that is qualified for the National Historic Register. And so that's one of the reasons why I wrote 2 op-eds last year for the Moultrie News. And the first one was early in the year about various problems affecting and suggestions of solutions for problems affecting our historic settlement communities. And that piece, I mentioned specifically that I had met and talked to some Phillips community folks, and they really, really wanted the 3 lanes. And they were fine if we wanted to do 535. They just didn't want 4 or 5 lanes coming through Phillips. And then I did another op-ed after we found out that Charleston County could not do 3 lanes. They said that flat out. We cannot do 3 lanes because it will fail the permitting process with the Army Corps of Engineers. And so then I asked, because I'm on Transportation Committee too, and I asked the question, I said, well, can you do something like a boulevard in the way that Coleman Boulevard, and I don't mean to look like Coleman Boulevard. What I meant was Coleman Boulevard has a median that's planted. Right. And one of the things we learned when a lot of people didn't want the median was allowing, since you couldn't have a head-on collision very easily, it was allowing the lanes to be a little narrower. And by having narrower lanes, 11 feet each, you could actually fit the entire thing in the current roadbed and right-of-way in the Phillips community without taking any of their land. And so I put that out in an op-ed, and I even called the representatives, Mr. Habersham, Mr. Ford. We actually had a meeting about it. We talked about this in town hall with the environmental groups. And what they told me resoundingly was, if you don't have to take our land, that's nice, but here's the problem. We'd still have a 4-lane highway in front of our homes, and we wouldn't be able to turn left out of our driveways. And so I said, well, we need to go back to the drawing board because there are ways to work around the turning left part. Some of the things that I think were considered were roundabouts at both ends, Joe Rouse and Dunes West Boulevard, and then maybe some protected U-turns in between. Unfortunately, they still didn't like that. And then what happened is we had a lot of outside groups get involved, especially environmental groups, Southern Environmental Law, Safe Shem Creek got involved, and of course, folks like Coastal Conservation. And the resounding drumbeat was about not taking people's land. And again, we'd already gotten past that point. We'd already gotten to a place where it wouldn't require taking people's land as long as we stayed with something that was more narrow. And so it was interesting that it transitioned so quickly into now Charleston County is saying resoundingly they cannot vote for the 3 lanes. For anything more than 3 lanes. So it's kind of the exact opposite of what was being said before. And so the $50 million, which the project was supposed to be around $137 million, now it's $187 million. Some people say, well, it would have gotten bigger anyway. It involves things such as the widening of Dunes West Boulevard. Now, Dunes West Boulevard, we have studied it as a town. It's a town piece of property. The town has studied this for years, and I can tell you because I verified it last week, our traffic counts clearly show that Dunes West Boulevard not only doesn't need to be widened at this point, but it actually isn't even on our our capital improvement plan for the next 5 years. So the traffic counts do not justify, even with Park West Boulevard being widened, it does not justify widening Dunes West Boulevard. So that's the first thing. If it needs to be done, the town of Mount Pleasant is prepared to step up down the road went, so to speak, pun intended, is prepared to step up in order to do that later. The other issue is this new parkway or highway through Laurel Hill Park. This is supposed to be a bypass so that Park West and Dunes West residents can get out more easily and come out way down Highway 41 south of the Phillips community. It will also mean that we would be bypassing Bessemer. And so Bessemer, of course, gets backed up a lot, has a lot of residential. And the biggest problem I see right now is that, one, it's a brand new idea. So it's a little upsetting because people are hearing things like we're going to need a bunch of sound walls. And sound walls, unfortunately, mean it's going to be loud. So all the homes and townhomes on Bessemer are worried. A whole lot of the folks in the other parts of Park West are worried. So I just want you to know, I had a meeting the other day. I didn't have it. I attended a meeting in the Phillips community outside at one of their facilities there with the environmental groups, Charleston County, and a number of members of the Phillips community. And what happened, what came out that day was that they're going to slow the process back, not because of the outcry, they're going to slow it back because they're required to. Because this is a whole new parkway, they have to go through the same NEPA process, which means at least 3 to 5 months worth of public input, informational meetings, etc. And so that's where we are as of this minute.
And I'm so sorry I got it mixed up, but I went back and double checked, and this is what Channel 2 said as far as your quote. They just don't see why we're going to spend $50 million or something I don't think we need right now. And I wanted to ask you why they're spending million more money on that. I'm so sorry, but that got it mixed up.
That's okay, no problem.
Let me ask you this. Why is this new plan being rushed or being pushed in your mind?
Well, it's interesting because at the outset, when it was announced to it was announced to the whole council, again, brand new information. And so we were told that day that Charleston County was going to vote on it that very next week, I believe. And we were like, what? That's crazy. We are just hearing this for the first time. And of course, we had gone away thinking A1 or ALT1 or not necessarily 5 lanes, but straight down 4-1 was the choice. So to have totally new information was a shock. Well, what happened is, very next day I called Herb Sass, who was at that meeting. He's our councilman on this side of town and the closest related to 41. And I said, Herb, what's going on? Why does this have to be rushed? And he said he had already asked for a deferment of the vote and that it would be deferred at least 30 days. So I was able to put that information out on social media for our end of town. I say our end because, it's next door, so it affects people on this side of town. I think there's at least 13,000 people that get on that format. And as I said, it was just new information to me the other day at this meeting that now it's actually going to be slowed way down. So the initial rush, I don't know if it was for effect. I don't know what it was for. I just know that we had the impression that it was going to be rushed. And now we're being told, no, it's not going to be rushed. It's going to go through the regular process because it has to. The Laurel Hill Parkway especially is brand new. And so that really does have to be studied in the same complete way that all the other plans were studied.
Let me ask you this too, Kathy. Can all of the existing Highway 41 be widened to accommodate 4 lanes of travel?
Well, another interesting thing that came out with the new proposal was that they are talking not anymore about 535, which, by the way, was Plan Alternative 2. That's the one the Phillips community has always wanted. I advocated for that, but Charleston County keeps telling us, the engineers keep saying it will fail the permitting process. But 535 has actually been moved away to 434. So I actually made a call to Jim Armstrong, one of the county engineers, who I know well, and I said, Jim, 434, are you telling me we might do something like the Boulevard idea that I came up with on the Bridge to Dunes West part and the Joe Rouse to 17 part, where we have a center median planted? He said, actually, there probably will be a center median for part of it planted, and then he said there may be a couple spots where they have to put the two-way turn left lane, so the two-way turn lane, but they are planning on it being 434. So as far as can they do 434 throughout, again, from what I heard the other day, Phillips does not want that. Here's what I would love to see, because of the fact that it would not encroach on the property And I believe when you look at how really nicely done boulevards are done, I believe that if the engineers could come back and say, here's how we could do roundabouts at both ends, Joe Rouse and Dunes West Boulevard, so that if you're turning left out of your driveway, maybe you can't turn left right there, but you can go just a little ways down. And if there's two or three, I don't know how many they need, there's going to be protected crosswalks no matter what. No matter what's done, they're going to have protected crosswalks. I think one of them is likely to come out at Oliver Brown. I think there's another one that's going to come out by Sunchaser. These are already being discussed. So if we have protected crosswalks, let's also turn that into a spot where you could do a safe U-turn. And if they did that, if they had that engineering done and they presented that, maybe the Phillips community would like the 4 lanes, and I'm talking about narrow lanes, not the full wide lanes. But I don't think they're going to go for it. From what I can hear right now, it's going to be 3 lanes.
Okay. And do you believe any options that take cars off the current Route 41 will actually increase travel times?
You know, that's one of the interesting, I think, misconceptions or misperceptions of the process is that this is not a bypass of Phillips. This new pathway, if it's a bypass of Phillips, it's only for the people who were coming out of Park West and Dunes West, going down Dunes West Boulevard and turning left. And I think I live up here, I do this every day. I think a whole lot of us weren't doing that. I never do that. I would normally always take Bessemer to get out to 41, which comes out Joe Rouse south of Phillips community. So from a bypass viewpoint, Laurel Hill Park is not really going to offer a new bypass away from Phillips. It's just going to take the traffic that would have probably gone on Bessemer. That's what I believe from what I can see. It's not going to take people coming over the bridge or people coming from Planters Point and cause them to turn left. Why would they turn left at Dunes West Boulevard if they want to go south on 17, they're going to go south on 17. So they're going to take the straight line. So they'll still come through the Phillips community, go down and turn right. So the main thing that the new plan, I suppose, would do is perhaps keep anybody from making the decision to go straight and turn left on off of Dunes West Boulevard. But I don't think probably not that many people do that now. So I personally think there's a lot of misconception out there. I think we need to have a lot more input from the people who actually live and work around here. I'm sorry to say I wasn't part of that process when they came up with the Laurel Hill Park. I wish I had been, because I've been involved the whole time and I'm on the transportation committee. Certainly the town, I'm not an engineer and the town is not the final say on this, but we do own Dunes West Boulevard and we also own the easement, the utility easement behind Bessemer. So they are going to have to come to us about this because we're going to have to give them some encroachment permits. And so I think it would have been really nice to have someone who actually lives up here involved in the process so we could kind of get some of these things solved before they brought it out.
And when will they get those encroachment permits?
Well, again, first they have to go through the process of getting this ready to go. And then I don't know the exact timeline, but I can tell you, I believe these next 3 to 5 months, they'd have to finish all the study aspects before they would ever be coming to the town for permits.
And do you foresee Dunes West Boulevard ever being widened in the next 4 years?
Well, again, no, not in the next 4 years. And here's why. Because this project 41 is not even going to break ground. No matter what happens right now, the timeline at best is 2026. I know that sounds very discouraging to a lot of folks because we've been waiting so long for something to be done. We are going to see something done. Let me give some hope to people. Okay. One of the things Mr. Habersham told me when we talked about Phillips and about the turning out of your driveway was he said, we never had this problem with traffic backing up in Phillips all the time until the light was put in at Joe Rouse. And I said, really, did you know that Charleston County is about to turn that into a continuous green? And he said, no, I didn't know that. I said, well, it's, it was announced, but it hasn't been made a big deal. So maybe this is an opportunity, Quintin, today to feel like you're breaking news. They're going to start on this in the next month or two, and they believe it'll be done by the end of the year. And what it will be is as you're approaching on 41, Joe Rouse Road, if you're coming south, you're going to be able to just keep going. There will be no red light. So you'll take that outer lane, you'll be able to do that, and you'll be able to merge back in. There won't be a new lane, but they'll use that full outer lane. And the folks that are turning left onto Joe Rouse will still have a light. The folks coming out of Bessemer to turn left onto, or Joe Rouse to turn left onto Dunes West Boulevard, I'm sorry, 41, 41, they will have a longer green time. So the idea is that by having a continuous green the other way, the only natural breaks in traffic will be when Dunes West Boulevard light turns red. The people coming out of Bessemer to turn left onto 41 will have a longer green. And what the effect will be, and they've done a bunch of studies on this, what the effect will be is there will be not nearly as much backup of traffic in the Phillips community and not nearly as much backup of traffic on Bessemer. So we're all going to pray and say, hope that's the case, because that would be much better for everybody as an interim plan before 41. But getting back to your other question about Dunes West Boulevard. So it's going to be 5 years before we break ground on the actual widening of 41. And there's no reason that Dunes West Boulevard would be the first phase of that. Again, the traffic counts do not justify that at this point, and the town has been doing one every single year. So we know that's not justified yet. So I believe there's I'm working hard and hoping that we can remove that piece of this puzzle for the time being and wait until organically we see that we need to widen Dunes West Boulevard, and let that be something that's way down the road if needed. So, but the time frame is definitely not in the next 5 years.
Okay, let me turn over to some politics. As you know, last week, Friday, current Mount Pleasant Mayor Bill Haney announced that he's running for re-election. How do you want to work with the mayor in the next 4 years on council?
Well, my term is up at the same time as the mayor's. So I haven't made up my mind yet what I'm doing next. I'm not at all sure that I'm going to run for town council again. There's a lot of things to be considered in that, so that's why. Some of my economic development work is extremely important, not only to me, but to serve the people of Mount Pleasant. And it might that I'm able to do that in a different capacity better than as a council member. So
would that
be continued.
To be continued. Could you continue that as mayor?
I have been asked to run for mayor by a lot of people, but I'm not someone that jumps into anything that doesn't make sense. So I've been doing a lot of homework behind the scenes, and I'll just tell you that on the side of private sector and organizations, economic development can also be accomplished very well by being a strong voice for Mount Pleasant on the CRDA board, on the CVB board, Convention Visitors Bureau, which I did serve on. I served on that, and even on the Chamber of Commerce, which I also served on. Not Mount Pleasant, but I could do that, ask for that too. So there's a lot of things I'm considering as to how can I best serve the people of Mount Pleasant going forward.
Does mayor make sense to you?
It would be an incredible honor to serve as the mayor of such a beautiful, wonderful place to live. And we have so much to offer. And I'm a very, very positive person. And I tend to find any negative situation, including all those I've faced in my own life, which is a lot, including as a young child. I tend to take negative circumstances and turn them into positives fairly quickly because I like to solve problems. So it's definitely not out of the question. So I'll just continue to do my homework on that.
Kathy Landing, thank you so much for your time. Again, welcome back to Quintin's Close-Ups.
Well, thank you, Quentin. I appreciate it, and it's always a pleasure. Have a great rest of the week.
Likewise. Thank you.